Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming, or you'll sink like a stone, for the times they are a-changing.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Watchmen for Nixon podcast. I'm Joe.
I'm Garret.
Great to be back with you all. Tonight we will be reviewing and discussing Season 1, Episode 3 of The Watchmen, of course, titled She Was Killed by Space Junk. Pretty intriguing episode, I thought. Introduction of Laurie Blake, of course.
Pretty great title.
Yeah.
Especially for the ending.
That too. I totally agree, man. What were your initial thoughts of this episode?
I just like everything else, I'm a big fan of this show. So this episode, surprisingly, considering there wasn't, in my opinion, a lot of action that went on this show, in this particular episode.
Sure, yeah.
I actually really enjoyed it. And I think the reason why I liked it is I really like this the Laurie Blake character. And the reason why I like her is I like the new spin on her. I like that she's kind of nihilistic. She's kind of bitter. She's kind of her father. I really want her, I want more of her character. I'm kind of hoping that she doesn't necessarily team up with them. I kind of want her to be a third part of a triangle.
Okay.
Kind of since I'm a huge Justified fan, I always look at it as you have the Raylan Givens as one point of the triangle, Boyd Crowder is the other point, and then whoever the villain of that season is, I want her to kind of be on her own. And I'll get into this more of what I'm expecting of her and what I'm hoping to get. Yeah. But I thought that, I think it's Jean Smart plays Laurie Blake.
Yes, yeah, that's correct.
I thought she did a really good job. Not as exciting as a Looking Glass or a Red Scare, obviously. But like I said, I find her almost more intriguing because we know that she's based out of the original group. Yeah, and so I like the idea that there are some people that know that, and so that definitely comes into play. But I really just like how she'll interact with the present day. And like I said, I want her to put her stamp on it, which I think she clearly did in this episode. And so I'm just really fascinated by her, and I hope she doesn't go away, but I hope she becomes stays a big part of the series going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they're definitely setting her up to do exactly that. I love the conflict that is inherently part of this episode because, just like you said, she was part of the original Watchmen group. She was Silk Spectre, and now she's been tasked to track down current day vigilantes and arrest them and bring them in. So this kind of flip-flop of roles that she has, that now she is on the side of the law trying to catch vigilantism, which is still illegal, or catch vigilantes, which is illegal to do, and bring them in. So I thought that was a really compelling part of the episode, and I absolutely can see where she's going to butt heads with characters. We didn't see her interact much with Red Scare. She had a brief interaction with Red Scare and Pirate Jenny in this particular episode, but I can see her and Red Scare butting heads.
And I hope that she does, because I want her to stay true to her character.
Yeah.
And I can't tell if she is, if she's on the side that she agrees with vigilantism because of her past, or if she's against it because of her past.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I think there's some nuance to her that we don't fully know, that's not been fleshed out. We can have the theory, and we can discuss a little bit later about, is Night Owl really in prison through the double entendre with Joe Keane.
Right.
And I know that is it Pedopedia is whatever they call it, or Pedopedia?
Yeah, something like that anyway. The companion Wikipedia style entry. Yeah.
Which would make sense on how they have the night vision goggles.
Yes.
And his Archimedes ship. So that would make sense. But one thing I guess I just don't understand still, and they haven't explained this, I just don't understand why this is taking place in Tulsa. Considering we acknowledge that New York City was the base of everything from the comic. I just don't understand, outside of we needed to place it somewhere where there's this great racial tension, how all these characters centered in Tulsa, and it seems like this is the epicenter going forward. I don't know if that's just we need to suspend belief here, or if he'll explain how these, these vigilantes like Laurie Blake, we know how she got here, but if Night Owl is arrested, is Night Owl arrested because he's in New York and that's where she lives, or is he arrested because he was in Tulsa? Because how do they have his stuff in Tulsa if he wasn't in occupation there.
Yeah, that's very true. Those are
I
great
guess
questions.
I'm just not concerned. I do think because obviously she flies an airplane to Tulsa. She doesn't want to go there. Is she in Oklahoma and not Oklahoma City? Or sorry, is she like in Oklahoma City, or is she in New York? Because she makes the comment that she doesn't want to go down to Tulsa, almost like she's in the state,
Right.
just doesn't want to go to that particular city.
Okay, interesting. I took it as her being in New York, actually, but now, as we're talking about this, I want to go back and rewatch that, because I think that would frame context very differently.
Yes.
If she was already in Oklahoma and I missed that, then why was she there?
I don't think they specify if she's in Oklahoma, but I do think in the conversation she has with Joe Keane that she makes it sound like I don't want to go to Tulsa, as in like a New York City person isn't going to be like, I don't want to go to Oklahoma, let alone they're not going to say I want to go to Tulsa. I think that you would have to be within the state to say I don't want to go to that city.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I get where you're coming from, yeah. Like I said, I'd have to go back and rewatch.
And I could be wrong, and that's fine. That's kind of what I took out of it.
Sure.
Is that maybe she's in a bigger part of the state.
Yeah. Well, I think it is something. I think Tulsa would be on her radar, though, because of that interaction with Keene.
Yeah.
Where he requests that she go because it's his project, essentially.
Yes.
The fact that he passed the bill, if you will, that allows police officers to wear masks for their protection. So that particular area is very important to him, and I'm sure to his voter base as well, to try and make sure everyone stays safe and secure in that area.
But is he a senator of Oklahoma then? Because if she's in New York City, why is he knocking on her door? And I guess that's what I'm saying is I think she has to be located in New York, because if he's a senator of Oklahoma, she needs to be centered in Oklahoma, because if he's a senator there, I think it makes sense that he would know who she is and that he would know where she lives. Not that you couldn't look it up, obviously, she's in the FBI database, but I'm just saying the fact that they seem to have a common knowledge of each other, and I would have a hard time believing that if she was in New York and he was an Oklahoma senator, there would be that kind of common, alignment there.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Well, I'd have to go back and rewatch it. This whole show so far, though, makes me want to go back and rewatch it.
Well, it's interesting. Before we go farther, I did go back and watch episode 2.
Oh, nice.
I want to talk about a couple things here. One is the theory about Ozymandias. He is in a separate timeline. That is the theory. I'm not breaking this. I think that there are other people that probably have this theory as well. But rewatching it, you realize that every section that he is in feels like you're in a different show, that he's in a different part of the world, and the candles. Obviously, we use candles to depict years.
Yeah,
and the fact that there's a new year every time on his candle, or an extra candle on his cake, that signifies that we're going. That's 3 years. Every episode is a year that he has been something. And so he is in an alternate timeline, which would line up with Lindelof, which would line up with stuff like Lost. He's not in the current, he is not operating the same day Laurie Blake is. So whether he is before or after, we don't know. But this is not the same time.
Totally agree with you. And I actually read, if you would like me to.
Go ahead.
Sound off a theory here that I read about. Have to disclose up front, this is not my theory at all, and I hadn't even considered taking it this far in terms of where he's located, not only when, but someone threw out the idea that he is actually on Mars, and that, let's call it terraformed, that this area has been terraformed, and that Dr. Manhattan is that gamekeeper or the game warden. And that it's kind of this back and forth between Ozymandias and Dr. Manhattan, and that the snippet of that news story that we catch in that first episode of Dr. Manhattan on Mars will actually be the culmination of Ozymandias' storyline on this show. So a different timeline, and he's actually on Mars while this is happening. I don't know if I buy that. Different timeline? Absolutely. The fact that he's on kind of a terraformed portion of Mars, I have a harder time believing that. Yeah, but I thought it was interesting.
I'm not going to buy that, because there's no evidence of anything we've seen that Dr. Manhattan has terraformed depicts that.
Right.
Like what he was building, that castle on Mars, or that building on Mars in the comic or in the movie, or even when we see him collapse on the CNN broadcast or whatever broadcast it was in the first episode.
Yeah.
There's nothing that signifies there's grass and land and water and still trees on anything he's ever terraformed. So I won't go that far. I just think he's in a different timeline. Now, we can get to this later. I think he's trying to get to Mars, and we can talk about that.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's currently on it. The next theory is that Will, who wasn't in this one, Will Reeves, the guy in the wheelchair, is actually Hooded Justice. And you really find this out because it makes sense when we realize in the Hood of Justice parts of episode 2, he says that my real identity is not released. I'm not going to tell you who I am. The guy that they found the body of in the water is not me. Second of all, he asks her if he can lift 200 pounds in the first episode, and we kind of push that away like it didn't matter.
Right.
So he's obviously supposed to be very strong. The second part is the colors of Hood of Justice are the same colors that Will Reeves is wearing in the wheelchair. Like his suit is the same colors. And then obviously with this type of a show with racial tension, the noose around the neck of Hood of Justice would obviously lend way more credibility of a significance with Will Reeves being Hood of Justice as opposed to some white hunky German guy.
Sure.
So I think that that's kind of two prevailing theories. I think that those will become pretty self-evident. I think they'll be revealed, maybe quickly. Like, who knows? Maybe in the next episode, because we already got confirmation of Veidt already in episode 3, that we get a second timeline.
It is entirely possible. And once again, I think this episode kind of continued along with the theme of giving us some answers.
Yeah.
So each episode, I think, has done such a good job of giving you answers to the questions you immediately had, but it's leading to more questions, of course.
Yeah.
Leading those breadcrumbs, and this is another example of that. We get some more answers, but now we have even more questions.
Well, and one thing I like about... So let's take this... We'll go away from theories and go back to the actual episode itself. Let's talk about Laurie Blake and her phone calls out to Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah.
So a couple things just right off the bat. Kind of crazy that they can just phone Mars and there's some kind of answering service for Dr. Manhattan on Mars.
Yeah.
Just kind of great. But why, again, I really like her character is she is bridging these timelines and she is bridging characters. So she's going to be able to pull in someone like an Ozymandias and a Dr. Manhattan and a Night Owl and bring that to the forefront with these characters like, Sister Night and Red Scare and Looking Glass. So I thought that the joke aside, the comedian joke, the comedian Rorschach's joke, then the joke with the 3 people that turn out to be Night Owl, Ozymandias, and Dr. Manhattan. One thing I kind of wrote down here why this was happening, though, I had a question. How often do you think she calls him?
It seems pretty regularly. So I would... Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Do you think this phone booth is only in Tulsa?
No.
Okay.
I didn't get that impression. I almost think that they have these type of phone booths set up probably throughout the country, and it's kind of like this national not contribution, but something that you can partake in and, try to contact Dr. Manhattan and leave him a voicemail, essentially, and maybe kind of contributes to that sense of awe and wonder. So I think this is something the government's probably kind of set up across the country at this point.
It's almost like it's a scam. They just don't know it.
Yeah, exactly. It's not actually sending the messages to Dr. Manhattan, right?
Yeah,
who
just
knows?
How they collect your data.
Yeah.
No, I want to talk too about her, and let's just stay on Laurie Blake here. So I found her telling jokes as just kind of a reference to comedian.
Yeah.
Okay, just her dad. But I also like the fact that when she shows the sting operation, right? So they're in the bank and they're trying to catch. I think his name is the Shadow.
Is it the Revenger or the Shadow?
I think they said the Avenger or whatever was another one, but this
one
is called
okay,
the Shadow.
I got you.
I really like how she shoots him.
Yeah.
As he's running away, because it also reminds me of her father. I think she is very much going to be like the comedian, not so much as brash and necessarily violent, like that. But I feel like she's shot first and asked questions later. Now, when I first saw this, I thought maybe that was Night Owl. And she maybe knew that the bullets wouldn't penetrate his armor or something, so that's why she shot him. But we find out that that's just not true.
Yep.
What was your take on this when she sets the sting operation? In fact, when she first starts robbing the bank, what went through your head?
I was very confused. So the scene did a great job because from the preview from last week's episode, the fact that they did this cold open, if you will, with her robbing a bank, I was like, what? This is an interesting twist. And then loved the fact that the entire thing was a setup so that they could get this vigilante to try to come in to save the day so that they could ultimately arrest him. Did find it very interesting. Now, while in the comics and in the movie Watchmen as well, it's clear that she doesn't shy away from violence, just like you're saying. The fact that she straight up was just ready to kill him as he fled, I actually found that pretty shocking for her character. I think it shows how cynical she's probably become by this point. And to your point at the outset of this recording here, that she probably is very bitter, that she's gotten to a pretty dark place, it seems like, from everything she's had to go through. And then that's mirrored yet again at Judd's funeral. So not only is she just ready to gun this vigilante down, someone who's protecting the public, regardless of people's thoughts on if vigilantes are doing the right thing or not, like who is trying to save people that were being robbed, she's willing to gun him down, not knowing that he was wearing bulletproof armor, which is what I gather from that exchange with another FBI agent at the end of that sequence. She had no idea that that was going to stop the bullets. And then similarly, at Judd's funeral with the bomber that was there, she just shoots him and then later admits to Angela that she thought he was bluffing when he said he had the leads hooked up to his heart, and if his heart stops, then the bomb will go off. She just gunned him down thinking that he was bluffing. So she's very much trigger happy, I guess you could say, in how she responds to some of these situations.
You know, daddy's girl, right?
Yeah.
So after this, she goes to her apartment, which her apartment, I don't remember, was it 412? I don't remember exactly what apartment number it is. I don't know what the significance is, but they showed you what it is.
Yeah.
She walks in, she's got that painting, you know, of like almost like a Warhol painting.
It's almost like a Warhol. That was so great.
The Watchmen.
Yeah.
She grabs a briefcase, opens the briefcase. It's 667, not 666. So that was kind of funny. Feeds something in a cage. We don't know what it is just yet. And then she gets a knock on the door, and it's Joe Keane. And, you know, Joe Keane to me is going to be the ultimate villain in this show. He is going to be the ultimate baddie. He is the 7th Cavalry member that's kind of out front that you don't realize yet. But he will end up being I will be completely shocked if he does not turn out to be the leader of the 7th Cavalry.
Yeah, I am in total agreement with you.
Okay. So I think it goes to be said that we're just waiting for the shoe to drop on him to become the villain. But I thought it was interesting that he talks about that he needs her to do this because he needs this DOPA to be successful. He does mention the fact that crime has reduced, and I didn't understand this at the time, and I still don't. I want to talk this over. He says crime has reduced 80% in Tulsa since they introduced the masks. Why would that have any effect on crime? And if to me that would just be that maybe crime is not being reported because you don't know who's doing it. Right? Like you can't say you're not reporting crime because you can't pick out the villain. So I don't understand how vigilantes wearing masks, cops wearing masks. I don't understand how cops wearing masks would reduce crime. So I just don't get that.
Sure.
But that's something he specifically talks about.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do like how he goes and asks if he can feed what's in the cage. And it's an owl.
Yep.
And it's such symbolic because, again, the Peteypedia is saying that Dan is arrested right now.
Correct.
And Joe Keane makes the comment that if he were to be successful here, he could run for the White House and presidents can pardon people. Or arguably, as he says, pardon even that owl in the cage.
Yes.
And that's clearly a reference to Dan.
Very true.
Do you think we'll see Dan?
Yeah, I do at this point. When we were first discussing our theories about the series before it even originally aired, I know we brought up Dan and Night Owl, but this makes me think even more that we'll absolutely see him. Maybe not in quite as large a role as what I hope we get with Lori. I'm hoping she is a very important part of this show. But at this point, because of now a direct allusion to him and the fact that it's been referenced about the pardon and things of that nature, I would be shocked if we do not see him, at least in some capacity.
Well, okay, so do you think, though, that their relationship would still exist?
No.
Okay.
No, I do not.
Okay. I want to go back to this briefcase because this briefcase will come up later.
Yeah.
When you see the briefcase and you see it glowing, I kind of immediately thought of stuff like Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, that was
with the
immediately
gold glow.
what came
And
to
I was hoping they would just leave it as that it was a blue glow. We really don't know what it is. It's the MacGuffin, or we don't really figure out what it is. We unfortunately do find out what it is, and it's a giant blue dildo.
Yeah.
That comes with the shaft and the balls, necessarily. And ridiculous, right? Which we can approach that later. But let's go talk about... So Lori goes to this FBI task force, and she meets Petey, who is a PhD. He's essentially a doctor who had studied criminology, specifically did his thesis on the 1977, what was it, crime? I don't remember what exactly he did his thesis on for 77, but he ended up studying Rorschach's journal,
Yep.
the 7th Cavalry. He is very aware of who Lori Blake is. And What are your thoughts on Petey here? Because he kind of joins the cast as a little sidekick.
That's essentially what he does, and in a very haphazard fashion almost as well, because she's basically looking around her room. She's been assigned officially at this point that she's going to Tulsa. She knows what she's investigating, and it's recommended that she go with someone else, or that the whole team, I think, pack up and accompany her, at which point Lori says, no, I don't need these people to accompany me to Tulsa. Eventually decides, after looking around the room, on the gentleman using the projector for this entire presentation, and that's Pete.
Yes.
Agent Pete.
Yeah.
So, and for, once again, to clarify, the PDpedia we keep referring to, you can actually go out to the web. It's an official HBO companion site, I guess you could say, and they are companion articles, I believe, as if they are written by Agent Pete, that are about things that his PhD might have been in, for example, about that criminology degree, things from the past, and it kind of helps connect pieces together.
Real interesting that they would put that out there as a companion piece. I mean, just kind of neat as a way to go about it.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think his character is very interesting. I think we get with Pete the everyman, right? Someone who is fascinated by vigilantism and by the interaction between probably the FBI and vigilantism. He's written about this, but now suddenly he's being kind of thrust into the situation at ground zero. Yeah. So I think he'll be very important going forward.
Yeah. So they fly across the, I don't know where they're flying. So maybe they're flying from New York. Maybe they're flying from, I don't know how far away Oklahoma City is from Tulsa. So again, they're in a plane. So we know that they are traveling. Their first stop is they meet, she kind of intervenes with Pirate Jenny and Red Scare as they've apprehended what they assume is a 7th Cavalry member. And it's just a kind of a great interaction where, Pirate Jenny's got a shotgun. Red Scare's obviously probably could shoot anybody at the drop of a dime. And she just walks up and says, I'm looking for, what's going on here. I'm looking for Looking Glass, essentially. I wrote down his actual name. Wade Tillman is his real name. And as we walk into this, essentially I don't even think is it really part of the police department, or is it just a warehouse they're using?
I think it's where they house the tank.
Yeah,
that Looking Glass uses, which is off-site, I believe.
Okay, yeah, that's what's weird about it. It's not in the police station; it's in a warehouse.
Right? At least it looks like it is. Once again, a rewatch would be really important because there is that scene in the first episode where it looks like they're maybe walking through the police department, but I don't know then if it cuts away to go to that tank the first time we see that or not. But either way, that's where she's tracked down Looking Glass and the rest of the department at this point.
I find it interesting as well, just because we talk about covering their masks. Everybody they apprehend, they blindfold.
Yeah.
So they can't until at least see them. She locates Looking Glass, and they go into the pod. Yes. And tell me what your thoughts on their interaction is.
This was a really great scene. I like the fact that Looking Glass actually removes his full mask in response to Lori knowing exactly who he is. But I think it's an important way to determine exactly what he's trying to do there as well. So it kind of helps clarify moments from that first episode where we know clearly this is designed to help him ascertain who's telling the truth and what they may or may not know, but we get a little bit further clarification there. But overall, great exchange between the two of them. Still really like Looking Glass. I think he's pretty compelling. So I'm interested to see where they take his character. The most important takeaway, for me anyway, from this scene though, was when Lori asks Looking Glass if Angela Abar is Sister Night, or rather brings her up knowingly that it's Sister Night. And he pauses and he hesitates, and then he finally agrees with the fact that, yes, Angela is Sister Night.
And I had a question on this, because my question was, does he really know that that's her identity?
Right.
Prior to this. And, is he pausing because he feels defeated that he has to give it up? Or does he feel that he pauses because he's like, well, I guess I didn't know that. But yes, know.
Right. And I read it as the first one. Okay. So I did take that one at face value. I think because Angela and her previous relationship with Judd, clearly Judd had, looks like a good working relationship with Looking Glass, insofar as it could be. And I think he knew that. And he was just, like you said, more defeated than anything. He was kind of felt trapped probably at that point and felt very uncomfortable that this random FBI agent knows so much about them when they've gone to such great lengths to try to keep themselves, kind of under the radar. So
here's a question. If she's the head of a vigilante task force, and why is she not rounding up Pirate Jenny and Red Scare and Looking Glass?
So I think this couples with our previous conversation that there is a difference here. We have masked vigilantes acting in a vigilante capacity outside of jurisdiction, outside of the police. And then we do have, what do you want, sponsored, maybe? Sponsored vigilantes or detectives that are just dressing as vigilantes?
That's true, because in the very first episode, when Judd Crawford is addressing the police force, Sister Night is not inside that room. She is outside, kind of behind that door.
She is at that moment, that's
and
true.
Red Scare, Pirate Jenny, and Panda, and Looking Glass are all in there sitting.
Correct.
And I think that Looking Glass is a detective.
I believe so. And Sister Night wears her badge on the opposite side of her belt as her rosary. So I think that's where there's a huge difference, and that's what I would actually love some additional clarification on too. That they're these masked vigilantes, kind of like what I view as the original Watchmen being, and maybe even as far back as the Minutemen, where they're completely outside of the law, a true definition of vigilante. But now we have people that are operating under, albeit loose authority, of the local police department, but that would then probably grant them some kind of immunity. They're not a straight up vigilante without a badge. They at least have a badge. So I think that's where that difference lies.
Yeah. Well, one thing we find out is when she is questioning Wade Tillman, is she asks, where can I find Angela?
Yeah.
And he says, you can find her at Judd Crawford's funeral, which will be in a few hours. And of course, Lori says, well, I need to change it to something darker. Thought that was funny. And next thing we know, they're heading to the funeral. She puts a gun on her anklet, which is important because they have to give their guns up, at which point they get electronically locked. Did you notice that?
Yes.
Okay, thought that was kind of cool. And she ends up meeting Angela and wastes no time in basically letting Angela know that she knows who she is.
Yeah.
And during the funeral, Angela starts singing, and all of a sudden we get a ticking clock, which obviously signifies something's about to happen, which we realize that there is a 7th Cavalry member that is crawling through a tunnel. He comes out in essentially a, what do you call those things, a crypt?
Mausoleum,
Yes,
maybe?
mausoleum.
Yeah,
Yep, you're right. And the suicide vest they were working on in the previous episode, he puts it on. Mm-hmm. And he just walks out, turns left, and goes right to the funeral. And I found this important because he tries to capture Joe Keane.
Yes.
Why do you think that this is important?
Because Joe Keane is behind all of this.
Yes.
The fact that everything seems so perfectly staged. The fact that he knows exactly where everything's going to be, that there's a tunnel that leads right next to where Judd's going to be buried. Everything seems very predetermined, and then Joe Keane, of course, gets to play the hero at this point and be like, yes, I will do whatever you ask, and then gets to go over and act like the hero. So
it also reminded me of Ozymandias' assassination attempt in the movie.
Yeah.
And kind of how this would be a fake assassination attempt. Because here's the thing. I guess we do know the bomb works. We don't know how he would have got out of it if she doesn't shoot him, which I thought would have been interesting.
Right.
Like, where does this go if she doesn't have the gun? But she does shoot him, like you said. And which I found interesting that the bomb didn't just blow up because it connected to his heart.
Ooh,
Like, it started beeping, and it beeped for about 30 seconds.
Right. I guess I read that as like his heart might not have, he might have been bleeding out and dying, but it hadn't completely stopped.
Yeah, I thought she shot him in the head, though.
Yeah, I get your point.
Any other depiction of like movies,
Sure.
obviously, it's like it would ignite. This thing just starts beeping, which is funny because if he just pushes down on the thing, there's probably not going to beep for 30 seconds before it blows up. And of course, Sister Night acts fast, drags the body into Judd Crawford's grave, tips the casket over on him, and it blows up. And I thought that was classic. And afterwards, we know that they're doing a questionnaire. Joe Keane's giving a speech. He's obviously making his political push. At which point, Lori grabs one of the coffees from Petey, walks back to the mausoleum, and just patiently waits because out of that hole walks Angela. Not even Sister Night, just Angela.
Right.
With those night owl goggles. And go ahead and talk about this interaction.
Yeah, well, this is where we really kind of get some tension between Lori and Angela. And we kind of see where both of them stand, I think, overall. And you can tell, I get it. In a lot of procedurals as well, there's always the inherent conflict between a federal investigation interfering with a local investigation. So I think that plays into it a little bit in almost a classic procedural sense, but there's more to it here as well, of course, with the fact that Lori seems to know awful lot about Angela. Angela does not have any idea who Laurie is. So a great moment to build some tension between the two because they'll probably have to continue to work together.
Well,
so
I also thought it was great that they brought up the hidden compartment
Yeah.
in Jed Crawford's house that Laurie had gone previously to his mansion, and references that, well, when her father died or was murdered, they discovered he had a hidden compartment too. And I
Yeah.
thought that was a great callback.
that is a great callback for sure.
And I was thinking about this. I like the idea that Laurie asks her what's the difference between a cop or a masked cop and a masked vigilante. And she says there's no difference. That's how Laurie answers to it. And I really, like I said, her character is so fascinating to me because she's going to be able to play both parts here. She could easily strap back on a mask and be a vigilante if she wants, but I don't think she wants that. I don't know if she is, like we said, she's so bitter because of Dr. Manhattan. She clearly has not let go of that.
Right.
We don't know what the relationship is after the rebound she would have had with Night Owl and what their relationship is like. She did help cover up the Ozymandias, attack on New York City.
Yep. So she's
she
probably
saw
got a lot of
Rorschach
guilt
die.
there. Yep.
She might have guilt with that. So we don't know what she's going for. So I can't tell if she's hunting vigilantes because she needed to blend in with the new life and she's just trying to make the best of it, or if she really wants to attack these people because she blames her and her other vigilante friends for, basically mistrust, an attack on 3 million people that they killed, and she harbors that, and she should harbor that. Let's be honest, right? And so I really am curious on where she'll go in this series going forward, if she's going to try to take down some of these vigilantes, specifically Sister Night, because I think that would be a great counterpoint. I think that would be an awesome, I don't want to say physical battle, but an awesome, just rivalry.
Yeah.
Would be great. And I really am interested to see if she can bridge the gap and bring some of these other characters that we like from the previous story into the current, and where she stands with that. Because is Dan still operating as a vigilante? And then how does she rectify that? Do we get Dr. Manhattan back ever? Do they interact? What happens? Does she see Ozymandias ever?
Right.
There's just a lot of questions to ask with her character coming in.
Definitely.
And after they meet, by the way, did she leave does she recognize the Night Owl goggles, you think?
Oh, gosh. Hard to tell in this scene.
I know.
It's, I'm more leaning toward the fact that this is technology that has started to be utilized amongst probably the military. We can safely assume that, but then also local police departments and things of that nature, too. So I'm sure it is a perfect callback. The fact that the first thing that she sees when she walks into the mausoleum, when Angela pops up, is just the top portion of her head with those goggles. So there's clear symbolism there. But yeah.
And then does she leave the goggles?
Yeah, I think it looked like she did.
It looks like she leaves the goggles.
I was kind of surprised by that, but yeah.
Also thought it was funny she pours the coffee out just because the coffee from the previous episode is just kind of symbolically there.
Yep.
She goes back, and I don't know if she makes a second phone call, which I think she is making a second phone call, where she finishes out her before she does that, she ends up going back to her hotel room, and she ends up pulling the large Dr. Manhattan version of the blue penis out, and instead of utilizing it, which I'm assuming that was her plan, she ends up knocking on Petey's door. Petey dons the mask that he brought on the airplane with him to try to blend in as a cop, which is funny because it's kind of a Night Owl mask.
Yeah, it very much
even
is.
her mask of the comedian.
Yep.
Which I thought was funny. And she ends up sleeping with him, and he has a Rorschach journal. I don't know. There's going to be something there. I think that's interesting.
Is.
Petey's going to have an interesting role to play. But she sleeps with him, so that, I don't know if that will cause problems going forward. Then she makes another phone call to Dr. Manhattan, finishes out the joke, and a car almost lands on her. And it was Angela's car. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I'll back up a minute. The whole ongoing joke throughout the entire episode, I thought that was clever, but the whole part of it didn't really land for me, I guess. I get her point and where she was going with everything. And obviously she was the girl who threw the brick, right? And that the brick was falling back. How I read the final scene, though, and this is what I'm curious about to hear your take on it, is when the car itself lands. And I've seen a lot of people say that was somehow Dr. Manhattan involved in that. I read that completely differently. I thought that was from that Night Owl-ish ship that took Will away in the previous episode, and that they're making a statement of some kind by then probably using that same exact magnetized grip and dropping Angela's car, which had previously had Will in it, of course. So I don't think Dr. Manhattan's involved in that, is my point. I think that... Well,
see, I do, and the reason why is I don't. I think we would have saw some kind of form of a ship. She would have seen it, which we don't. When she looks up, she sees a glow, an orange glow, which kind of is symbolic, I want to say, of Mars in a way.
Yeah, I agree.
So I'm going to go ahead and say that maybe it's not Dr. Manhattan, but I don't think it's that ship necessarily. How they got that car, I'm not sure. And that goes back to the previous episode with that magnet and the fact that there was a ship attached to that. And I don't think I'm assuming Dr. Manhattan's not flying it.
No, he would have no need to fly a ship.
Right.
Yeah.
So... but I would think if that was a ship that dropped it, we would have saw the ship.
Okay.
Personally, that's what I would think. And I think the fact that we didn't, I think it's just one of those things where I think that's going to be an unanswered question. I think that this will be something that's going to be like kind of like Lost. That's just, you're never going to figure out how this car lands there.
Okay.
And who's responsible for it.
I think the reason why I read it is just on its surface because they, correct me if I'm wrong, but the magnet picks up Angela's car with Will in it at the time. And now in this episode, it's Angela's car being thrown back to the grass. So I read that very directly.
No, I get it. That's fine. My question is, I guess we didn't have Will in this episode.
Yeah.
I'm curious where he's at. And he does make that comment in the second episode, that he is Dr. Manhattan, which, again, I don't believe he's Dr. Manhattan.
No, I don't believe that.
I think the argument could be made that he's Hooded Justice, and I think that would symbolically work for this series the way it's going. So I think that that's what he'll be. Do you think we get Dr. Manhattan next week?
I don't.
I don't either.
I don't think we get him until at least past our midway. Well, actually, it's close to it. By next week, we'll be close to our midway point, essentially. Okay. But no, I view Dr. Manhattan as the back end of this season when we will get to see his character, I think.
Okay. Let's talk some Veidt. Adrian Veidt. Go ahead.
Gosh, these segments with Veidt are some of my favorites in this show, but it's so bizarre.
They're amazing.
So bizarre, but they deliver every time.
This Jeremy Irons, I think the way he seems so like cheerful and just like playing it with such exuberance, kind of reminds me of the Jeremy Irons from Die Hard 3. Die Hard with a Vengeance.
Yes.
Like, he's just going for it. Like, he's only in the film for, the show 7 minutes a night, but he's arguably the best 7 minutes. Like, I just want to know what he's up to.
Yeah.
Like I said, really good. And here's
really good.
We didn't really even have it wasn't really a heavy Angela episode,
which
I thought was okay. I thought Laurie Blake was a great character. I know that Regina King is the main character of the show, but it was very fascinating, and I think it worked very fine to not have her be the main character, like of this episode. I'm okay if they don't make any particular person the main character, and you get these different stories. And I think that you need to, or else you're not going to have that, connection to these guys.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
I like that.
I think there's a lot of different story points to hit on with this, especially in a relatively short amount of time, actually, that they have to tell this story over this first season. So I think it would be very smart to get different opinions and different approaches to the same subject matter from these different characters, especially because the show creators themselves even said that they don't really include good guy and bad guy in how they think about the characters in this show. So that begs the fact that we need to have different viewpoints on what's going on, if that is truly the case, that they don't want good guys and bad guys, that they just have people reacting to those situations.
They say that, but I still don't have the nuance of the 7th Cavalry that I want.
True.
And again, I don't want it to come up as like I want to be a member of this group. The only time we saw them this week was the Suicide Vest, and obviously the belief we have that Joe Keane is going to be the stand-in for whoever the Grand Wizard is of this group. But I do. I don't know. I don't need like them to be sympathetic. I don't need that. I just want more nuance of like maybe you follow one, like, somebody who's joined the group and doesn't know what he's doing. I just think that there could have been room for that. I think there could have been room for a new recruit storyline.
Okay.
Maybe questioning what he's doing, but maybe you find out that maybe he does come from Nixonville, which looks like it's a shanty, and maybe he has a bad life and he sees what's going on out there. He sees police brutality. Like, you can't deny that the police are also extremely violent people, and you can understand how there would be a huge mistrust of law enforcement in this show, and that these people might not trust the cops, and therefore to blend in and to feel secure, they join this group. They join a gang, essentially, is what this is. It's just a different kind of gang that we don't think about. And so I just wish that there was kind of that storyline to build off of. Whether that character ends up turning out to throw that life away, or if he ends up dying because that's the life he chose. I just feel like there was room to flesh that out.
Okay, I gotcha. I understand where you're coming from with that. To actually completely contradict myself from last week because of how this episode went, I'm less convinced we will get that nuance.
Oh, yeah.
Because it seems a lot like what they're trying to focus on is between Laurie Blake's character or between Laurie Blake and Angela Abart specifically, that the show seems to now be kind of focusing on these two different methodologies, if you will, for dealing with a similar problem.
Sure.
So I think the 7th Cavalry might end up being the true bad guy, which I know they said that they weren't going to use those terms explicitly, but I can see them very much being the bad guy, and that we'll get that reveal with Keen later on as kind of the mastermind behind everything that's going on, and that the true source of conflict and why they don't want to say who's a good guy or who's a bad guy is more about the police officers, the vigilantes, the FBI, those group of people, I think is where the focus is going to be. So less convinced we're going to get the nuance there.
Okay.
But either way, I think they could still make it compelling. Don't get me wrong. I think by having them as the true villains of the show and then exploring how all of these other characters with FBI, with local police department handle that could still make for a really quality storyline. So
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Back to Vite. Give us your Vite take.
So we got a couple things that we can can't really necessarily confirm the timeline, but it lends credence to that theory, as we mentioned at the outset of this episode. So we get 3 candles on the cake. We get confirmation that Vite is Vite.
Which is great.
Yeah, which is great. So we should call that out, the fact that we get official confirmation that's who he is. My favorite part, though, is when he dresses up in the Ozymandias costume. It was so good.
Yeah, you know what's
I love
funny
how
is-
he's got the mask and everything.
I thought it was great that the mask fit. I was hoping, though, and granted, he's physically fit. Like, you see him prancing around in kind of topless robe with some kind of, like, I don't know, undergarment on for pants. But I was kind of hoping, you know how, like, somebody who hasn't been a superhero for a while, I kind of think of, like, The Incredibles, and they try to put on the costume, it just doesn't kind of fit.
Yeah.
And the mask itself is really small, which is really funny compared to, like, the rest of his face. I just kind of wish it didn't fit snugly.
Okay.
Or fit maybe too snugly, and he kind of can't freely move in it. I just wish that for comedy relief, I just wish that would have been kind of his take.
Yeah, fair enough. A couple other things, though, that we get out of this that are still unanswered questions, and arguably the most important part that we get from Vite's segment are, 1, what appears to be a space launch of some kind.
Yes.
We get one of the clones being presumably launched into atmosphere, because when we next see that clone, he's very clearly been frozen, essentially deprived of oxygen as well. And Vite has a little bit of a meltdown here himself out of frustration. So that's a pretty big part that happens that we're trying to find an answer to. 2, the Game Warden. The fact that the Game Warden is displeased with how he's been behaving. He shoots, was it a bison, I think?
Like
It looks like a buffalo that he's hunting
I think
there.
you're right. I think it's a bison.
So I found that really intriguing as well, that he's referred to as the Game Warden, that he specifically responds to an event that a Game Warden logically would respond to, but it's almost a game, it seems like, that there's something bigger afoot here that we don't quite know.
Well, we know they have an agreement.
Yes, we know there's an agreement.
We do know that he cannot disrupt this agreement again or he'll be shot.
Yes.
But we do know that he's going to disrupt this agreement, and he dresses up as, Ozymandias to actually, I'm assuming, go back and hunt again.
I would assume so, yeah.
What do you think is with the skull and crossbones? Because we've seen that flag now all 3 times.
Correct. I don't know, and that's very frustrating. I've tried not to look that up, as silly as that sounds, because I want to figure it out. I want my own theory on it, and Pirate Jenny comes to mind each time I see it, just because of Pirate, which is silly. I don't think she has anything directly related to it. It's just what springs to mind. Okay. So I'll defer to you. Do you have any good working theories on that?
I don't, and I didn't look that up either. I didn't want to, kind of similarly, I'm trying not to look up theories. The only theory I came across was the potential of a hooded justice thing.
Sure.
But when I kind of did confirmation bias when I went back and rewatched it and said, yeah, that all makes logical sense. It just strikes me as the alternate timeline for Adrian Veidt makes sense, because it's a Damon Lindelof thing, it's a Lost thing, it's a Leftovers thing, it's a Westworld thing, even though he's not a part of it, but that's an HBO thing. Just alternate timelines work, and it's a great way to keep people on their toes, right?
Absolutely.
You're thinking you're going to get Sister Knight to actually interact with Ozymandias. we might not actually see them ever interact. And I wouldn't be shocked if we don't. And I'm okay with that. I don't think that needs to happen.
Right.
I think that's, I'm okay. So I don't know when his timeline, I don't know when his story is, but I'm really fascinated by it. And I am fascinated by it because I do agree with you. I don't know how he's launching this guy, if it's a trebuchet, if he's launching him like with a catapult into space,
right?
Trying to.
Because it looks like that might be what he's trying to do.
Yes.
Like just working with the resources available to him.
Now, I've never seen any other trebuchet launch something straight up in the air and not expect it to not come back.
Right.
So I'm curious on, how he got him so high.
Yeah.
And how he really thought he would achieve what he's achieving.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's all these little clues and the disturbing prospect that after the play, he mentions when he says put him in the basement, we'll have a use for him later. I just have no idea what game he's playing, what he's trying to accomplish here in terms of, we mentioned as well that he's likely trying to, you think maybe get to Mars or find a way to...
Well, his character did always have the fascination with Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah,
so if
very
Dr.
much
Manhattan's
so.
On Mars, I would think he's trying to get to Mars.
Sure.
His, not superpower, but superpower was always supposed to be the smartest man alive. And he could logic in a way that Dr. Manhattan can't. So, or like critically think in a way that Dr. Manhattan just doesn't compute it because he just doesn't think that way. I don't know why he would think that would be successful, though.
Agreed. And I think we're all supposed to be reading into this that he is losing his mind a little bit as well. Well, more than just a little bit,
Could
that he's losing his mind, because I also had that same exact thought process where we know it's been well established in the comics, the movie adaptation, and Laurie herself, by way of her joke, that he's the smartest man on the planet, just like you said. So how's the smartest person on the planet supposed to know, or rather trying to attempt launching a person presumably into space with this arcane technology? Like, that doesn't match up in my mind. So there's either clearly something that he knows that the rest of us don't in terms of how he's going to accomplish this task, or that task truly isn't able to be accomplished and he just doesn't realize it yet because he's started to lose his mind. So
I think maybe your theory is Dr. Manhattan is not, I don't believe he's terraforming on Mars for this. Now, I don't know if I'd be disappointed if it turns out that he's on Mars somehow. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if Dr. Manhattan is messing with him. Back on Earth, though.
Right.
And not necessarily on Mars. Like I said, there's no evidence that there's ever been anything terraformed that would be remotely that on Mars from the movie or the comic, I'm assuming. So we have not seen that. Again, I would be fine if Dr. Manhattan's messing with him. I kind of hope to have more about like Crookshanks and stuff. And so it's like, I know I only get 7 minutes, like an episode, but I like his 7 minutes. I'm very fascinated in what he's going to come up with next.
Yes.
So I like how he doesn't sit down and eat the cake. He just throws it right on the ground.
Throws it on the
He's
ground.
Angry.
I know.
I like how he stomps on the frozen body and like he starts essentially breaking it. And then the other guy, Mr. Phillips, comes up. The other butler, and he's like, "Oh, hey, blah blah blah." And it's just like, great effort.
Yeah.
Way to put in a great effort.
My whole thing with this, though, too, per your Dr. Manhattan comments, is how he fits into this, because I don't know if it's Dr. Manhattan's character to like actively try to mess with Ozymandias. Maybe if he did something in the years since we last saw them to kind of wrong Dr. Manhattan, maybe Dr. Manhattan would want to seek retribution of some kind or to mess with them, but he's just so detached, is my point. He's so removed from anything emotionally that would register to him that him wanting to mess with Ozymandias, I don't know what the purpose there would be, but who knows?
Well, what's kind of funny about this episode? The other way I think about it is true. I don't think we had a historical context at the beginning, right? There's no historical flashback like there had been in the first two episodes, like the Tulsa Race Riot, the World War I incident. And is it because this episode really had the least amount to do with racial tension in the series so far? This was, again, a very Laurie Blake centered episode, and she's not feeling the racial tension that, say, Sister Night is. And again, Sister Night is kind of a sub-character in this episode, whereas in the previous ones, even Will Reeves, I guess, is symbolic of this, stuff, and that's these flashbacks. So I'm curious if we're going to get more. We have to get more racial flashbacks.
Yeah,
I'm just curious how much longer they can keep him back out of the story without bringing him back.
Yeah.
So I do like that Laurie Blake acknowledged that it's a wheelchair, and they're looking for a guy in a wheelchair. That was something they thought, well, maybe you guys missed this,
right?
Because you're so distraught. But I thought that was, she's on the case, and that would be good too because she's searching for, who hung him.
Yeah.
So I think that's again. I think you're right. I think you're going to have a fascinating rivalry with her and Sister Knight, which will be great because those are two strong performances.
Yeah, absolutely.
And very nuanced characters.
That as well.
So,
totally agree with you.
Yeah. Next week's episode, I'm trying to think if I can remember what showed on the next week's shot. I don't remember.
Well, we get more. The thing that stood out to me most from it is with Vite again. The fact that I think he is trying to use. We get to see more of his experiment, it looks like, next week. I think we'll get some more answers for what he is trying to accomplish. Once again, this show's been really great about that. This week's episode, that's a pretty big lingering question we have. What the hell is he trying to do in the way he's going about doing it? And then next week, I think they will answer what he's trying to do. I think they'll give us that answer, but we'll just lead to more questions from there.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I do know that we seem to visit in the next week's preview Tim Blake Nelson's Looking Glass's, maybe his residence.
Yeah, possibly.
And that he's not wearing a mask. So I think that will be fascinating too to see like where he lives, how he lives.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, overall, I still think it's a great show. I look forward to this episode, the new episode every week. So I really enjoy this, and I'm to the point where I'm like, I don't know if he's going to only have one season, but man, I hope he takes it a second season right now.
Yeah.
And I hope he's a part of it because it is, to me right now, it's great. I know his Dark Material starts tonight.
That's right. Yeah.
But I'll hold off on watching it for now because I think that this is so great. So
Totally agree with you.
Anything else to add?
No.
Well, we do want to thank you guys for joining us tonight. This is the Watchmen for Nixon podcast. Joe and I, again, it's Joe. I'm Garrett. You guys can find us weekly. We do have the Aliens and Cowboys podcast where we do pop culture breakdown. We did not have an episode last week. We do think we'll have one this week. We're going to talk about Game of Thrones. We're going to talk about my review. I did see Terminator Dark Fate and why I'm disappointed in it. And we'll talk about a couple other things this week. So again, go out there, hit the subscribe button on Watchmen for Nixon. If you're willing to, give us a review. Leave us a star rating, 5 stars if you can. That really helps us. Let us know what you think. You can get us on Twitter at Alien and Cowboy. You can email us comments, questions, concerns at aliensandcowboys@gmail.com. Again, we're here, so let us know what you think. Go out, subscribe to that. Subscribe to Aliens and Cowboys. That way you can follow us. And we'll be back with you guys next week. Cheers.
Cheers.